I have with me today Samuel Wearp, a prominent Christian author and speaker, somebody who's involved in a number of evangelical Christian organizations and supporting the State of Israel for more than a decade. And I'm Maayan Hoffman, executive editor at ILTV, and welcome to you.
Thank you.
Samuel, I want to get started by just asking you a little bit about yourself and about your connection to the State of Israel. How did you get so involved in personally supporting the cause?
Sure. Well, I'm fortunate to have amazing parents, and parents are, I think it's an amazing thing to have parents that raise their children to desire God's heart. And so people always ask, how did you become what many people have come to refer to as a Christian Zionist? How did you become a Christian Zionist? And I think when you read your Bible, you find out that God is a Zionist. And God says in Zechariah, I'm zealous for Zion. And when you realize that, you realize that God has a heart for this land and this people in this place. And so my family, that was kind of our beginning journey into Zionism and realizing how this land is important to God. It's a land that God always has his eyes on. And so for us, it was just, it was kind of eye-opening. At the same time, it was, once we realized that it was everywhere. Once you start reading the Bible, it's everywhere. It's like God is working in Israel, and he's focused on this place. And so as we saw his focus was here, we wanted to also be focused on what he's focused on.
Now, Christians weren't always supportive of the State of Israel. This actually seems to be a newer phenomenon, maybe certainly since the founding of the state, or even more so since 1967 and the reunification of Jerusalem. Talk to me about that shift and how Christians started to read the Bible that way and actually see it as something that was alive today.
Yeah, for 2,000 years, Christianity could look at the Jewish people and say, we're the new Israel, because there was no Israel in the land. And so that might have worked then, but it doesn't work anymore. And so it's very difficult to say God's not working with the Jewish people, God's finished with them because you're back in the land. And so for us, it's realizing that we have 2,000 years of history that maybe needs some rectification, and we need to get back in line with what God is doing in the world today. And so I think, 4 or 5 generations ago could have said God's done, but for us, we have to come to the reality that this still is the land of Israel, and you still are the Jewish people, and there's no replacement theology, there's no new idea that God's working on. God is continuing to be faithful to the covenants he made back with Abraham. And so for us, that's been the realization of, I think, many Christians now are waking up to that reality. It's a new phenomenon that people are realizing God actually means what he says.
Well, how many Christian Zionists do you think there are? Maybe even in America, let's just say.
Not enough.
Not enough.
Not enough. That's all I know.
Okay, for sure. Now, there's been a huge outpouring of support from the Christian community during this war. But we saw, unfortunately, a real tragedy happen last week in Washington, D.C., where a young couple, I'm from Kansas, she was from my community, actually a Jewish girl from Kansas, and her soon-to-be fiancé were murdered outside an event in Washington, both employees of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. Now, the young man who was killed, was part of what they call the Messianic Jewish community here in Israel. So, first of all, just tell me, did you know him? Did you know the family? How involved is the community that's pro-Israel? How does it impact you?
Sure, yeah. So I didn't know him personally, but several of my friends here in Israel did. And so it's definitely impacted them, and it's impacted the family, the Lischinsky family, and I'm friends of friends. And so it's a very small community. So I know some of the Messianics here in the land of Israel, and so everybody knows everybody. Just like in Israel, everybody knows everybody. It's the same there because it's even an even smaller group. And so, we're definitely impacted by it. And I think for us, there's this realization of it could have been any one of us. All of us have, I think, worked in D.C. at one time or another, and just being there. And so it was a real shock to hear, and it's a real shock to their community. And so they're definitely in our prayers right now. There's no way to make this right, but we want to see an end to this, that we don't see things like this happen again.
100%. And he was obviously killed just for them thinking he was a Jew, for him being an Israeli coming out of that event. Now, again, he's a part of the Messianic Jewish community, they're saying, and you referred to yourself as a Christian Zionist or evangelical Christian. What is the difference between an evangelical Christian and a Messianic Jew?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very loaded question, and I'm not going to get the right answer. But for me, my understanding, or the way I would put it, is a Messianic Jew is a Jew that, in America anyway, because here in Israel it's something very different. Messianic Jews are all over Judea and Samaria, right? They're very Messianic, and so
they're Messianic, thinking the Mashiach is coming.
It's coming, right? But so that's a first clarification. We're talking about a Jew that believes in Jesus.
Okay.
Would probably refer to themselves as a Messianic Jew,
okay.
One that believes in Jesus, or a Christian Jew, which might sound like a contradiction, and we might get into that. But for me, I'm not a Jew, and so for me, I'm just a Christian, and coming to that realization of Zion is important. Christian Zionism fits very well for me, and I think for Jewish people who say believe in Jesus, which might be a contradiction, and yet, however, it's a reality. Like there are Jews that believe in Jesus. I think it's just something that people have to wrestle with and recognize that there are people that claim both.
They claim both. It's interesting. And I mean, I think you just said it best, right? Evangelical Christians are Christians, and Messianic Jews, so I guess what I'm understanding, are Jewish people who have chosen to take on some of the Christian belief system, a belief in Jesus. Now, can a Jew actually, I mean, they can, but can a Jew be Jewish and believe in Jesus? I mean, even from a Christian perspective, does that work out?
Right, and so I was trying to think of how best to answer this question, and I think if we look back to the Shoah, the time of the Holocaust, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a Christian pastor, right, non-Jew. David Fogel was a Jewish believer in Jesus, and then we had Anne Frank, who was, just a Jew. All three were killed by Hitler. And so for me, there's, we can get into the nuances of you believe this and I believe this. The reality is that Hitler would have killed all of us. And so, and we see now that the left, and not the left, but, the ideas of the left and what's being purported, what's being promoted against Israel is beginning to pay the price. And it's going to come for all of us. And so it's come unfortunately to the Lischinsky family, the Milgram family, but it's also an ideology that is against truth, against love, against hope, against light. And so, there is definitely nuances in there, but I think most importantly, it's a realization of who are we. We're people searching for truth. And so, I would say that all of us, Messianic Jews, Christians, we're pursuing God, and as we search for that, I pray that we would be able to bring truth and light and love to the world.
But now the Messianic Jewish community, I know, tends to make people somewhat uncomfortable. I mean, first of all, I don't know if you know, but do you know any numbers? I mean, how many congregations or how many Messianic Jews are here in Israel?
I couldn't give you the number.
You couldn't give me the number.
No,
I know that last year I'd done an interview when I was working with the Jerusalem Post where they had told me that there were around 300 and some odd congregations in the country. I don't know if it's still an accurate number, but I'm assuming it's more or less around the same. But what makes the Jews very uncomfortable with Messianic Jews, from what I understand, and maybe this a little bit applies to some Christianity, is this idea that there's proselytization.
Sure.
So what is it? First of all, what about evangelical Christians? Do you feel that there is a drive to proselytize, or is it just part of the faith to share your faith with people, which is different than proselytizing? And then when it comes to the Messianic Jews, do you believe that to be accurate?
Yeah, so when it comes to Christianity in general, I would say that Christianity has kind of been pushed forward as a missionizing religion. And so to say that that Christians are coming here, or even Messianic Jews, and they have bad intentions, I don't know is correct. I don't think they're bad intentioned. But I would say that there's a misunderstanding there of coming here to Israel and trying to share about your beliefs. I think they do it out of love, but I think there's not a correct understanding of how to love a Jewish person. And the best and simplest way I can explain this is, I was thinking about this today, is in regards to my wife. Right? When it comes to my wife, I love her for who she is. I don't love her because I want her to turn into something that I want, or, I'm not loving her because this is the person that, I'm trying to tweak her into my
Your
version of.
Your wife is Jewish?
No, she's not.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
No, but I'm not trying to tweak her into somebody that she's not. or that, I'm going to make her
You're
a
not trying to
perfect
change her,
person.
in other words.
Yeah, I love her
Okay.
for who she is.
Uh-huh.
And I think in regards to Christianity and Messianic Jews, when it comes to Israel, if you say you love Israel, then come and love them for who they are, right? And for love them for their divine destiny that God has for them. So don't love them because you think you can change them or turn them into something that they're not, but love them for who they are. And I think that's what it's come to for me, is I've learned to love Jewish people because I really see that God is working through them and in them, and they are bringing goodness to the world. And so
Hopefully most of us, I don't know.
Yes, yeah. And so I think it's just there's a missing element there where people think that you have to believe the way I do in order to make a difference in the world, and I would say I disagree, and I've seen it.
And it's interesting because I know there's been historically a lot of questions about whether Christians were supporting Israel because of some end goal. And maybe there is some, end eschatological vision, but, Judaism has that as well, right? You mentioned the Messianic Jews that live in Judea, Samaria, other places. Jews certainly have a belief that the Mashiach or the Messiah will one day come. Christians have the same belief. Actually, Islam has a very similar belief as well. It's just, I guess we'll all find out one day, right, who's right. And it's not really necessarily something that should divide us today in the physical world is what that will look like, and hopefully sooner than later, but who knows when. And I mean, I guess let me ask you this: how do you ensure? Well, two things. Number one is I would say that I think that's changed a lot in Israel. That there's a real coming together with the Christian Zionist community. We've seen that both on the political level, in the White House, but also even before Trump came into office, Netanyahu and his one of his top ministers, Ron Dermer, were very close with the evangelical Christian community and believed that they were incredibly supportive. And we're seeing that, the International Fellowship of Christian Jews, when it was founded by Rabbi Yechiel Eckstein, he was ostracized. Today, it is one of the most prominent organizations in the country. Yael Eckstein is incredibly respected, his daughter who runs it. Exactly. And there's more and more and more examples of that. So from your perspective, what could you say to Jewish people to ensure them that this is not an issue anymore, in most of the time?
Really, I can't say anything because I think there are Christians that are getting it and there's Christians that are not. And for the vast majority of Christians that are out there, they're not getting it.
Oh, they're not? Okay.
No. And so I feel like we're kind of on the front lines in many ways of making a difference. Christianity is a very large ship that has to be turned. And so I would just ask for grace as we move forward. My dad likes to explain our relationship as a very slow dance. We're figuring things out as we go, and we're stepping on each other's toes very often as we begin. But as we're learning to trust each other. We're learning to learn the other's desires. We've been talking for the first time in 2,000 years, and now all of a sudden we can have a conversation. What do you actually believe, right? For 2,000 years, Christians were saying, oh, this is what the Jews believe, and now we're talking to Jews, and we realize, oh, that's actually not what you believe, and it's because of 2,000 years of not talking. And so I would say that there is a movement of Christians who are coming out and saying, we support you, we want you to be the best Jews that you can be, right? We believe in your mission and your vision, and we want to be a part of that. But for the most part, it's not happening, and I am worried for the Christian community, and I want them to wake up. I think it's part of our job as Christians to, turn the ship, as I was saying, and bring people in to this vision that of all nations going to Jerusalem, of the people's gathering and coming and being a part of what God's doing. And so I'm excited. At the same time, there's a lot of work in the future.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that vision of everybody coming to Jerusalem, that's in Zechariah, also in Zechariah. And my daughter had her bat mitzvah on Sukkot a few years ago, another daughter. And she learned Zechariah, and we talked about, the March of the Nations and all the nations coming here, and how when, God willing, the Messiah will come, sure, that all of the nations will come and they'll stand at the bottom and it will be a house of all nations, which is really what one day the Temple Mount should be, the temple should be. And it's a really beautiful vision that comes out in the Torah and the Bible, which is, adhered to by both of us. Now, I mean, it's interesting because, the reason I asked, you said about changing your wife, which is actually an extremely good point when you're in a relationship, that you should not be trying to change the other. But, she looks very religious. So I thought, oh, maybe she is Jewish, and I know your parents also, they really, they dress, I would almost say what we call in, Yiddish, I think it is, frum, right? Like Orthodox.
Yeah,
so So tell me, I mean, you've taken on a little bit of the Jewish practice while knowing you are, as you said, Christian. What drives you to do that?
That's a good question. And for us, I think really we feel it's not just a connection to the Jewish people, but it's also respect for God. Mm-hmm. And the Jewish people have been showing the world for 3,500 years or so how to honor God. And so that's what we want to honor God in our lifestyle and in how we act and how we walk and how we talk. The Jewish people have some really good pointers on how to implement that into life. And so, we're not trying to say that we're Jewish or show that we're Jewish, and we're very upfront about that we're Christians.
Yeah,
We're not trying to portray ourselves as anything else. But at the same time, we're also trying to honor God, and we feel that that's a great way to honor God. And there is, like my wife wears a head covering, but there is Christian tradition for that as well. And so it's not like necessarily a Jewish thing, because 2,000 years ago, everybody was kind of in the same level, and we
everyone was a little more modest than they are today.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Yes. 100%. And I know you've actually written a book. It's called The Dire Straits of Redemption, a 21-day journey to transform Jewish and Christian relations. So what is the book about? Let's start with that.
Sure. So the book is started from emails that I was writing, and the emails were in connection to how Christians can basically come and be a part of what God's doing in Israel today. It was connected very much to an organization that I work with called 10 from the Nations, which formerly was called the Nation's Ninth of Av.
Okay.
And so the Ninth of Av is all about, remembering the destruction of the temple and bringing awareness to that reality. So for 2,000 years, Jews around the world have mourned for the loss of the temple, and everybody else has stood by and either laughed or mocked or and today, most people have no clue that, about what Jews are doing on the Ninth of Av. And so it's bringing awareness to a day that I like to say, and the way I explain it is, it's not a day that just the Jewish people lost, but the whole world lost. Yeah. So the Romans didn't win when they tore the temple down, right? The whole world lost on the day that the temple was destroyed. And so we're trying to bring back awareness to the fact that we want God's house, right? So God's house is humanity's home, is the way I like to say it. So we are trying to bring awareness to that reality, and how do you come into right relationship with the Jewish people in order to be in a place where you can be ready to receive something from God. And so that's I think important for all of us to grab a hold of. If we want God in the world, how do we get right with each other first?
So give me an example of something that you talk about in the book that helps to depict that.
Yeah, so I talk about various things in the book, but I think the one thing that really illustrates this is the story of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva comes to the Temple Mount and sees it in destruction, and he begins to laugh, and his three friends ask him, why are you laughing? How can you laugh when you see the destruction? And Rabbi Akiva says, because I've seen the destruction, I know that in the future will be redemption. Basically, I know I've seen the prophecies of destruction, and now I can believe in the prophetic redemption. And we're living in those times. And so waking people up to the times that we're living in. I think a lot of people don't realize even what's happening here in Israel, and we get so caught up in the daily grind of life, in the American dream, or American nightmare, as I like to call it. And you're running and you're rushing and trying to, accomplish something that King Solomon, in all his wisdom, said is vanity. And instead, we should do what he did and build a house for God. So that's kind of what I'm trying to. We got to just switch our focus, and if you really love humanity, and if you really want to see the restoration of the world, then you should be working towards bringing restoration to Jerusalem, and telling the Jewish people, take your place in the world and be a light to the nations, and that's what we want. That's my heart, is to see the Jewish people take their place in the world, and whatever I can do to support that is my honor to do. And so I just, in connection to that, I was thinking about something that I heard in a podcast recently, and it was Jordan Peterson and Douglas Murray. Fascinating podcast, and I would encourage everybody to check it out. But in the podcast, near the end, Douglas Murray is talking about the famous phrase that we were kind of alluding to in Isaiah chapter 2, where it talks about that, and it's in front of the UN. Douglas Murray is talking about the verse in front of the UN, it says that nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor shall they learn war anymore. And Douglas Murray then says, but I noticed something, and it comes, the verses before that. Mm-hmm. And Jordan Peterson says, well, that's called a precondition. And it's the verses where it says, come, let us go up, that all the nations are going to say to one another, come, let us go up to the house of the Lord our God, and to the mountain of the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us his ways, and we walk in his paths. For out of Zion will come forth, for out of Zion will go forth the Torah and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And so you don't get nation, not lifting up sword against nation until all nations are coming and seeking God in Jerusalem. And so we dream about that day when that might happen. But the reality is it's never going to happen if the nations don't know where to come to seek God. And so that's my heart. Let's wake the nations up to that reality.
It seems like we're so far off. I mean, just, today I was doing interviews. We're hitting this week, the 600 days of war. Yes. And talking to people about whether we're winning and we're losing. And, the diplomatic war, the war of hate and PR has been obviously lost. Mm-hmm. We're seeing so many nations come against us, more and more, in fact, as we continue to try to fight for our security. And it's very contradictory. I mean, as you say, you've got, and it makes, it's a small group, you're saying, and I guess that makes sense. But how do we do it? I mean, who's reading your book? Is it getting out there? Are you helping to educate people?
I think there's a plenty of material out there. I would encourage everybody to get my book, but also there's amazing materials that are coming out by Christians and Jews that are bringing awareness to the reality of what we're missing. And I think that there's a feeling here in Israel that is not anywhere else in the world, and that is an expectancy for redemption, an expectancy for Geula. And I think we need to wake the people in our spheres up to that reality. There is redemption coming, and it's coming fast. It feels like it's a speeding train, and yet when I look at the work that's ahead, it's like 100 years in the future, And so there's that balance of knowing the times, and I think we're in a really crucial time. I think that was something that I think we all woke up to when Yaron and Sarah were shot in D.C. You're not safe in America. You're not. You can't hide. They'll come find you, and so as tragic as it was, I hope it's a wake-up call to everyone in the world. It's time to get on board and involve yourself with and align yourself with what God is accomplishing in the world, and also just the message of hope and truth and light that's coming forth from Israel, right? There is a word that's going forth from Zion, and it's beautiful, but because of the media, the people can't hear it. And so there's a very beautiful thing that's happening here that the world is blind to because of the media. And so
media is like a pretty broad term.
It's a very broad term.
Of the media, but I don't want you to throw us all in that same bucket
there.
No,
of course. Yeah, of course. But I always tell people, if you're watching CBN or Fox News, generally, if it's about Israel, it's negative. And so there's very many beautiful things that are happening here in Israel. And so I know your ILTV is very good about that, and very many other organizations here in Israel, the Israel Guys and other people that I've worked with. There's so many organizations that are good about bringing light and truth, but
they're just not reaching far enough yet.
They're just not reaching far enough.
Yeah, 100% of
that
is true. Yeah. This week we had
8 billion souls we have to reach.
Yeah. How many souls did you say?
8 billion.
8 billion souls.
Close.
Wow, it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of people.
I guess, you better keep going because a few a day. But, this week we celebrated Jerusalem Day, and it's the day that we celebrate the reunification of the eternal capital. Christian Zionists really believe in that idea. We mentioned that one of the things that really woke up some members of the Christian community was when we refounded the State of Israel, mm-hmm. and the 67 war that we won in 6 days, bringing Jerusalem as our eternal capital once again together. So talk to me about that. I mean, and also you mentioned, these Messianics, as you called them, in Judea and Samaria, which are really religious Zionist Jews who mm-hmm. believe that Mashiach or the Messiah could be kind of on the cusp of coming, or we're living in the end of times, and certainly believe in sovereignty, let's say, right? Sure. Enacting Israeli law over the territories in Judea and Samaria, which is very controversial. Mm-hmm. So talk to me about that, and why do Christians go that way? Like, why do Christian Zionists say, not we just support the state of Israel, but we support the state of Israel and we believe that Jerusalem should not be divided, and we believe that Judea and Samaria, all of it, not just what we, under the Oslo agreements, call Area C, let's call it. It's very complicated. We don't need to get into areas A, B, C,
Sure.
whatever, but there are areas where Palestinians live and kind of live autonomously now, right, in Judea and Samaria. There are areas where they're kind of shared by Israel and the Palestinians, and there are areas that Israelis live in.
Yes.
And Christian Zionists say, we want it all for the Jews. Explain.
Yeah. I think it comes down to a very simple point, and that is we read the Bible. And I mean, I think that's why we're here in the first place. The Bible is what brought us to this point. Being Christians and taking the whole thing for what it was. There's a whole idea within Christianity. There's the New Testament and the Old Testament, right? And we read it all together as one. And I think it really opens your eyes when you say, no, this is one book, for us anyway, right? It's one book. And everything that's said here is the same, just the same in both books. And so when you read that this is the land that God gave to Abraham, then it's quite simple. This is the land that God gave to Abraham. And so nothing can change that. And so it's very religious, right? And we don't shy away from that fact, and we don't pretend that we're something that we're not. We're very religious in that belief. That's just the reality of how it is. The other side is also very religious, right? It's a religious war that I think the West doesn't want to understand or doesn't see or pretends isn't happening, but it's a very religious war. I mean, for all things considered, this war is the people in Gaza were saying this was because of Al-Quds, right? This is for over Jerusalem. And so there's a recognition that it's very religious. And so when we read our Bible, we say, what does it say? And then how can we understand that for today? And for understanding that for today, it seems very obvious that land belongs to God's people. Unfortunately, I heard this stat from several years ago, but it said that 90% of Christians would say that they believe that the land that God gave to Abraham belongs to the Jewish people.
Okay.
But at the same time, the same amount of Christians, approximately 90%, and this is quite a few years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago, but it's unfortunately probably still very true today. The same amount, 90% of Christians, would also say that the land of the West Bank should belong to the Palestinians. And that shows you the disconnect, right?
Right, because they
not
didn't
realizing
realize.
the land that was promised to Abraham is the West Bank, is Judea and Samaria.
Right, it's not Tel Aviv. That's always what people get confused, is they don't realize that most of the biblical sites that we read in the Bible actually are positions in Judea and Samaria, some in Gaza. I mean, that's mentioned as well.
It's a huge disconnect that we have to rectify. And just getting people to understand, not just, what does it say in your Bible, but now where are these places and who's living there and what is the history here. So I remember once going into Jericho. Jericho is right now, under Area A. It's all Palestinian. And hearing their version of this city, it's not the Bible story. So it's definitely something different. And so we can get so caught into, what do people say today that we don't realize, this is the Jericho that Joshua and
I was just going to say my Bible songs, from when I grew up. Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho. That was,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and so there's a whole other side. They presented us when we went there, they presented us with a whole other ulterior story of how Jericho came to be, have nothing to do with the Bible. And that's the media that's going out there, from the other side. And so we have to really wake people up to the reality of this is God's land. And it does take a fight to hold on to God's land. So, when Jericho and the Israelites came into the land, he didn't say, I'm going to do it for you. But he said, I would be with you. And so that's the promise that we take with us, so as we go into the future.
Amazing. So we're going to run out of time, but I do want to ask you one more question. There's been a lot of studies coming out showing that younger evangelicals are actually disconnecting from the Bible in general and from the state of Israel kind of alongside that, and not reading it the same way. What is it that you can tell these young Christians who maybe are not speaking out, are not standing up today for the state of Israel at this critical time?
Yeah, well, I would say, first of all, come to Israel. It really, I would say, saved my faith. I was 15 or 16 the first time I came, and there were just a lot of questions, how the world works, and, where's God? And you come to land, it all becomes very real very fast. And so if you're a young person and you're seeking and you're seeking truth, it says seek and you will find. And so I would just encourage them to come. I would also encourage them to plug into different organizations that are bringing truth into the world. And ultimately, don't just come, but volunteer your time and your energy and your effort, and you'll be blessed. I've been blessed. So this has been an incredible, life-changing adventure for me, from the time I first came here to now, which is going on 15 plus years, I think.
Putting you in your 30s, since you said you came at around 15, just to...
Almost 30.
Almost 30, okay.
Yeah. So, and it's been an incredible adventure. So, and I think the final thing would be, there's a most oft-quoted phrase in the Tanakh, in the Bible, where God says, ILTV, don't be afraid. And so I think a lot of people are tuning out because it's a battle. And who wants war? Everybody just wants peace. Nobody. But before you have a peace process, I heard somebody say this once, before you have a peace process, you have to have a war process. And I think we're in that right now. And so instead of tuning out, you have to tune in. But you have to tune into the right side and believe for goodness and work towards it. And also just be willing to give your life, just like Yaron and Sarah. I mean, they were in the middle of our capital, in the middle of America, and who would have thought? And it might cost you, but it's worth the cost because of the future that awaits all of us. So.
Wow, so amazing, remembering Yaron and Sarah and wishing only good, and that we should not have to have incidents like that happen in order to remind us. But Samuel, thank you so much for sharing this information today.
Of course, my pleasure.
Thanks.
Shalom.